The day my son introduced me to a room full of strangers as the woman who used to clean his office, I finally understood that I'd spent 31 years building a man who was ashamed of me. I want to go back to the beginning, though, because the shame didn't come out of nowhere. Shame like that is grown. It's watered and fed and given sunlight, and I'm the one who did all the gardening. So, before I tell you what I did at that dinner, the thing that made his fiance's mother set down her wine glass and stare at me like I'd grown a second head, I have to tell you how we got there. His name is Wesley. I named him after my own father, a man who drove a delivery truck for 40 years and never once raised his voice to me. I had Wesley late at 38 after 2 miscarriages and a doctor in Cincinnati who told me kindly that I should probably make peace with not being a mother. So when Wesley came, 8 pounds and furious about it, I looked at him and made a promise I didn't say out loud. I promised him he would never want for anything. I promised he would never feel small the way I'd felt small, growing up in a house where the heat got shut off twice a winter, and my mother sewed my school clothes from my older cousin's hand-me-downs. His father, my husband, was a good man named Errol who fixed industrial air conditioning units and died of a heart attack on a job site in Dayton when Wesley was 9. One minute he was up on a roof in the July heat, and the next minute he was gone. And I was a 47-year-old widow with a 4th grader and a mortgage and a life insurance policy that turned out to be worth a lot less than Errol thought it was. I'm telling you this so you understand I wasn't a wealthy woman pretending to struggle. I scrubbed floors. That part of the story Wesley liked to bury is true, and I'm not ashamed of it, even now. After Errol died, I took a job with a commercial cleaning company that serviced the office buildings downtown. We worked nights, my crew and I, 3 women and me, going floor to floor after the lawyers and the accountants had gone home. I emptied wastebaskets full of torn-up drafts. I vacuumed under desks where men made more in a month than I made in a year. I wiped down conference room tables and put the chairs back exactly square because the supervisor said square chairs meant we'd be invited back. And I did it for 16 years, through Wesley's braces, through the trumpet he begged for and played for exactly 4 months, through the SAT prep classes I paid for in cash, $20 at a time, and an envelope I kept taped behind the silverware drawer, through college applications, and then through college itself, which I helped pay for with a second mortgage on the little ranch house Errol and I had bought the year we married. Wesley was bright. I'll give him that, and I gave him everything else, so I might as well give him that too. He got into a good business school. He worked hard, I won't pretend he didn't. But somewhere along the way, and I've spent a lot of nights trying to find the exact moment, the way you'd search a dark room for the thing you tripped over, somewhere along the way he started to flinch when I picked him up from school in my work clothes. He stopped inviting friends over. When a teacher once asked what his mother did for a living, he told her I was in facilities management. I found out years later and laughed it off. I shouldn't have laughed, because here is the thing nobody warns you about. When you spend your whole life making sure your child never feels the sting of being looked down on, you can accidentally teach him that looking down on people is the worst thing in the world, and that the people who get looked down on, including his own mother, are something to escape from. He got the good job. A consulting firm in Columbus, then a bigger one, then a fancy title with the word director in it before he turned 30. He bought a condo with a doorman. He started wearing watches that cost more than my car. And I was proud. God help me, I was so proud I could have burst. Because wasn't this exactly what I'd worked for? Wasn't this the whole point? My son, in a suit, in a building like the ones I used to clean. He paid for things after a while. He'd send money on my birthday, always a clean amount, always by transfer, never a card. He moved me out of the old ranch house, too much upkeep, he said, into a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex he picked, closer to the highway, further from my church and my friends. He set up the lease and paid the deposit and told me it was the least he could do. And I let him because I was tired and because I thought that's what it looked like when the sacrifice finally paid off. The child takes care of the parent. That's the deal. That's what I'd been promised in some unspoken contract I'd signed in my own head decades earlier. But the visits got shorter. The phone calls got further apart. And when he started dating the woman he would eventually ask to marry, a poised, lovely young woman from a family that summered somewhere, an actual verb, summered, I noticed that he never brought her by. A year of dating, and I met her exactly twice, both times at restaurants, both times for under 90 minutes, both times with Wesley checking his phone like the table was on fire. The engagement happened in the spring. He called to tell me, and I cried, and I asked when I could meet her family, and there was a pause on the line. Just a small one. But I'd raised this boy alone for 31 years, and I knew the shape of his silences the way you know the sound of your own house settling at night. "Soon, Mom," he said. "There's just a lot going on." The dinner came in October, an engagement dinner, the kind I'd never been to in my life, at a country club out past the new developments where the streets are all named after the trees they cut down to build them. Wesley called me 3 days before. He sounded careful. He used the voice he uses when he's about to ask me to do something I won't like. The same voice from when he was 7 and wanted me to call the school and say he was sick. "Mom, listen. Vanessa's parents they're a certain kind of people. Old money, you know. Her dad's on the board of 2 hospitals. He took a breath. I want this to go smoothly. For Vanessa, I don't want anything to be awkward." "Of course not, honey," I said. "I'll wear the navy dress." "Right. Good." Another pause. "And maybe, if it comes up, maybe don't get too into the cleaning stuff. The old job. People at this level, it can be hard for them to relate. I'm just thinking about how to make everyone comfortable." I held the phone. I was standing at my little kitchen counter, the one with the burn mark from where I once set down a hot pan in the old house. The only piece of that house I'd been able to bring with me. I looked at that burn mark and I said, "I understand." I didn't understand, but I said it the way I'd been saying it for 31 years. I spent $41 at the salon getting my hair set, money I told myself was an investment. I pressed the navy dress twice. I bought a small gift, a hand-blown glass bowl from a shop downtown, wrapped it myself in silver paper, and I practiced in the car what I would say when I met Vanessa's mother. "We're so happy to be joining our families." I said it to the rearview mirror until it sounded natural. The country club had valet parking. I gave the young man my keys and saw him glance at my 15-year-old Corolla and then, kindly, look away, and I felt the first cold finger of dread go down my spine. Inside there was a private room, candles, a long table set with more forks than any human being needs. Vanessa met me at the door, gracious and beautiful, and led me toward a cluster of people holding wine. And that's when it happened. That's the moment. Vanessa's mother, Diane, no, that's wrong. I won't even give you her real name. I've decided I won't. Turned to me with a polished smile and said, "And how do you two know each other?" She thought I was a guest of the club. She thought I might be staff. I don't know what she thought, but before I could open my mouth, Wesley stepped in, put his hand lightly on my shoulder, and said to the whole bright circle of strangers, "Oh, this is the woman who used to clean my office building, actually. She practically watched me grow up. We try to stay in touch. The woman who used to clean his office building. I have heard a lot of things in my life. I have heard a doctor tell me my baby had no heartbeat, twice. I have heard a police chaplain tell me my husband was dead. I have heard hard things, terrible things, the kind that hollow you out. But I have never, in 73 years on this earth, heard anything land the way those words landed, because they came out of the mouth of the boy I'd given my whole life to, in a room he'd built on the back of everything I'd scrubbed and saved and sold. He didn't say, 'This is my mother.' He couldn't. The mother part was the part he was ashamed of, and so he'd kept the part of the story that made me sound charming. The loyal old cleaning lady, sentimental, harmless, and surgically removed the part that made me his. The circle smiled. Someone said, "How sweet." Vanessa's mother said, "Isn't that lovely that you've kept up?" And Wesley smiled too, relieved, because it had gone smoothly. Nobody was uncomfortable. I had been made comfortable to look at. I had been turned into an anecdote. And I want to tell you that in that moment I felt rage. People always think rage, but it wasn't rage. It was the strangest, quietest clarity I have ever felt. Like when the wind stops before a storm and everything goes very still and very loud at the same time. I looked at my son's face, at the easy relief in it, and I understood that he had not slipped. He had not been put on the spot and panicked. He had planned this. He had thought in advance about how to keep me at the party without claiming me, and this is the solution he had landed on. The cleaning lady. Stay in touch. I had a choice in that moment. I could be the woman he'd made me. I could smile and play the part of the sentimental old employee, get through the dinner, eat the salmon, go home to my one-bedroom apartment by the highway, and never speak of it. That woman would keep the peace. That woman would protect his evening. I'd been that woman for 31 years. I set the silver-wrapped bowl down on the linen tablecloth very gently, the way I used to set the chair square, and I straightened my back. I'm short, and I'd spent decades bent over wastebaskets and floors, but I have a back, and I straightened it. "Actually," I said, and my voice came out clear and carrying, the voice I used to use on the night crew when the floor wax got delivered wrong. "I think there's been a small mix-up. I'm not the woman who cleaned Wesley's office building." I turned to Vanessa's mother and I smiled at her. A real smile. "I'm the woman who cleaned office buildings, all of them, downtown, for 16 years on the night shift after my husband died so that this young man could go to the school that got him the job in the building he's so proud of. I'm his mother." You could have heard a fork drop, and one nearly did. Vanessa's father set his down very carefully against the edge of his plate. "I raised him alone from the age of 9, I said, and I was not crying, which surprised me, because I'd expected to cry. I sold my house to pay for his education. I am not ashamed of 1 minute of that work. The only thing in this room I'm ashamed of is standing right next to me, and it took me until just now to see it." Wesley's face. I'll carry that the rest of my life. The way it changed. The relief curdling into something else. The smile breaking apart in pieces like ice going off a roof in spring. "Mom," he said low, urgent. "Mom, come on, let's not." "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not going to ruin your evening. You've worked very hard to make sure no one here would have to feel uncomfortable, and I won't undo that." I picked my purse back up off the chair. "Congratulations, Vanessa. You seem like a kind young woman, and I hope you are. I hope you'll be very happy. I won't be staying for dinner." And I walked out, past the valet who brought my embarrassing little Corolla round, and I tipped him $5 because the work he does is the work I used to do, and you take care of your own. I drove home with my hand steady on the wheel. I didn't cry until I was in my own kitchen, looking at that burn mark on the counter. The last piece of the house I'd sold for a boy who turned around and renamed me. Here is where the story would end, if it were only a story about a cruel son and a wounded mother. But I told you at the start I'd spent 31 years gardening. That shame, and a thing you grew, you can stop watering. Wesley called the next morning. Then 6 times that day. Then Vanessa called, which surprised me, and which I'll get to. The voicemails went from defensive, "Mom, you really embarrassed me. You didn't have to make a scene," to wounded, to, by the 3rd day, something that sounded almost like a child again. "Mom, please pick up. Please." I did not pick up, not because I wanted to punish him. I'm too old to enjoy punishing anyone. I didn't pick up because for the first time in 3 decades, I understood that every single time I had picked up, I had been teaching him that he could treat me however it suited him, and I would still be there, square and ready, like the chairs. But I'll tell you what I did do, and this is the part nobody expected, least of all me. That apartment by the highway, the one Wesley leased and paid for and was so proud of providing, I gave it up. I called the management office and gave my notice. And I called my younger sister, who'd been after me for years, to come live near her in a little town in Tennessee where the cost of living is gentle and the church is full, and her spare room had been sitting empty since her own husband passed. I'd always said no. I'd said no because moving felt like admitting that the deal hadn't paid off, that the son I'd built wasn't going to take care of me after all. But it isn't admitting defeat to stop waiting for someone to become who you needed them to be. It's just growing up very late at 73. I want to tell you about Vanessa because she's the reason there's any softness left in this story at all. She called me on the fourth day, and her voice was shaking, and she said, "Mrs. I'm so sorry. I realized at dinner I don't even know your last name. He never told me your last name." And then she started to cry, and she told me that she had grown up watching her own mother, the polished woman with the wine glass, treat the help like furniture, and that she had spent her whole life promising herself she'd never become that, and that she had looked at me standing there in my navy dress with my chin up, and she had thought, that is the kind of woman I want to be. And then she said the thing that undid me. She said, "I don't think I can marry someone who would do that to his own mother. And I don't think you should let him pretend it's okay." They didn't get married. I want to be honest that I have complicated feelings about that. I didn't want to cost my son the woman he loved, but I think she cost herself the wrong man and saved herself, and I respect her too much to wish she'd done otherwise. Wesley came to Tennessee in February. He drove 8 hours and showed up at my sister's door without calling first, which is the only smart thing he'd done in months, because if he'd called, I might have told him not to come. He stood on the porch in the cold, and he looked older and smaller, and when I opened the door, he didn't make excuses. He just said, "I told a room full of people you cleaned my office because I was afraid they'd think less of me if they knew you scrubbed floors." And the whole time, the only person who should have thought less of anyone was me, about me. We've been talking since, slowly, on my terms, which is new for both of us. He's in something he calls counseling, which his father's generation and mine never would have done. And I won't pretend I understand all of it, but I've noticed he's stopped sending me clean round amounts of money and started sending me actual letters in his own handwriting, which is terrible, which it always was. I keep them in the drawer behind the silverware where I used to keep the envelope for his SAT prep. I'm 73 years old. I live in a town I'd never heard of 2 years ago, in my sister's spare room that's now my room, with a window that looks out on a dogwood tree. I clean nothing but my own small space, and I do it gladly. And sometimes a woman from church will ask about my son, the successful one in Ohio, and I'll tell her he's doing well, which is true. But I don't tell her he's a director, or about the watches, or the condo with the doorman. Those things were never mine to be proud of anyway. They were the price tag, not the gift. What I'm proud of is this. I spent 31 years teaching a boy that he should never have to feel small. And then on one October night, at 73 years old, I finally taught him the lesson I've been too busy to teach him all along, that you can stand all the way up in front of anyone in any room, no matter what work your hands have done, and tell the truth about who you are and where you came from. It just took me until that night to learn it myself. I only wish I'd straightened my back 30 years sooner. But I straightened it, and the floor I'm standing on now, this small wooden floor in a town nobody's ever heard of, is the first one in my whole life that's truly mine. For 31 years, I told myself that love meant making sure my boy never felt small, and I never once stopped to ask what that lesson was actually teaching him. That's the part I carry now, in my sister's spare room with the dogwood outside the window. Wesley didn't wake up cruel one morning. I built the man who stood in that country club and renamed me. One small surrender at a time. Every time I laughed off facilities management. Every time I said, I understand when I didn't. Cause and effect is not a punishment handed down from somewhere. It's just the quiet arithmetic of a life. You give a child everything and ask for nothing, and he learns that you require nothing, including respect. I did that. Nobody did it to me. But the same arithmetic runs the other way, and that's where the hope lives. The night I straightened my back and told the truth in front of those strangers, something shifted that I'd been waiting 3 decades for without knowing it. Not because I shamed him. I didn't go there to win, but because I finally treated myself as someone worth telling the truth about. Wesley drove 8 hours to a town he'd never heard of and stood on a cold porch and named the thing he'd done, plainly, without an excuse. That doesn't happen to a man who's only ever been protected. It happens to a man who finally meets a consequence he can't transfer to someone else. If I could reach back and say one thing to the younger woman scrubbing those office floors at 2 in the morning, it would be this. Doing right by people is not the same as never letting them feel discomfort. The kindest thing I ever did for my son, I did at 73, when I let him feel the full weight of his own choice and didn't rush to lighten it. Real character in a child grows from 3 things, and I gave him only one. I gave him my grit. Lord knows the boy works hard. But I forgot to give him a steady sense of right and wrong that didn't bend to whoever was in the room, and I forgot to teach him the plain good judgment to see who'd actually carried him there. Strength without decency just builds a faster engine for selfishness. Strength without clear thinking just helps a person run harder in the wrong direction. So if you're raising someone, or loving someone, or rebuilding yourself the way I'm rebuilding mine, don't measure your love by how much you sacrifice. Measure it by what the person becomes. Teach them to stand up straight and tell the truth about where they came from. Teach them to think clearly enough to honor the hands that fed them. And teach them that endurance only means something when it's pointed at something honest. I learned all 3 too late to raise him with them, but I wasn't too late to learn them for myself. And the small wooden floor I stand on now is the first one in my whole life that's truly mine.